Time for another Patreon-sponsored review. Today we're going to be looking at SilverHawks, which is a show I probably would have gotten to on my own at some point. Oh, too late now, no takebacks! SilverHawks was an animated series that originally aired from September to December in 1986. It lasted only one season, but it had a respectable 65-episode run. It was created by Rankin Bass, fresh off the success of their previous show, Thundercats. Something viewers of this channel should know all about by now. Of course, they had a toy line as well, and they're the shiniest action figures you'll ever see. Look at that shine. It's like a brand new car. But unlike a lot of other well-known 80s cartoons, this one seems to have fallen by the wayside. I remember it being well known, but it's not really talked about as much as other shows. Well, that's odd. Did people just forget about it, or does nostalgia lie? Though I don't really like using that word anymore, for a number of reasons. Well, anyway, let's take a look at SilverHawks. So in the distant galaxy of Limbo, a vicious criminal named Monstar escapes from the Penal Planet, which seems to be more of a space station than a planet. Semantics. So Earth sends a special team of law enforcement specialists to fight off him and his criminal army and keep the peace in Limbo. They're given sleek cybernetic bodies equipped with lasers, flight wings, and gives them enhanced strength. They are Quicksilver, who is the leader, the twins, Steelheart and Steel Will, who I assume are fraternal twins. On top of being very strong, they're both also scientists. Together they are both the brains and the brawn of the team. They can also do that twin thing where they can communicate telepathically to know when one is in trouble. Also, they're kinda sports fans, in case you can't tell.
Gee, it's 4th and 10 on our own end zone, Hart. But the playbook's empty.
Jock scientists? Ugh, the show's so unrealistic. I like that their metal bodies are molded to look like their hair, including Will's beard. I hope they like that look, because now they're stuck with it. The youngest member of the team is Copper Kid, a mathematical prodigy from the planet of mimes. Yes, apparently somewhere in the universe there's a race of mime people. We never actually see their planet in the show, but that might be for the best. Since he's a mime, he doesn't speak, but instead communicates through whistles and a synthesized voice.
You ready to score some points?
The ship the SilverHawks use is the Mirage, which has pods for each member of the team that lets them launch into action. The ship's pilot is Bluegrass, a former Air Force colonel who is as skilled as a pilot as he is on the guitar. In fact, he actually uses his guitar to fly the ship.
You ever seen a toy like this?
What was that, Sheriff?
E-flat, lady. E-flat major.
Bluegrass is the best character in the show. When they arrive at their new headquarters, Hawk Haven, they meet their commander, Stargazer. He's one of the first SilverHawks made, and he's been doing this for literal centuries. So he's got that seasoned police officer / gruff detective personality. His office in this space station even looks like an old-fashioned detective's office. Talk about committing to a bit. They also meet what might be one of the 80s best TV show animal mascots ever, Tallyhawk. He's a cyborg hawk that flies through space and acts as their spy. Throughout the show, we see many other cybernetic birds like him. In fact, almost every character in the show gets some kind of bird companion, but they're nowhere near as cool as Tallyhawk. That's why he's the face of this franchise. For the bad guys, there's the leader, Monstar. He may seem like just a big hairy guy, but when exposed to the light of the Moonstar, which might be a moon but is definitely not a star, he transforms into a big metal guy who terrorizes the galaxy on his space squid mount. Because if you're going to terrorize, you might as well look cool doing it. He also has a suck-up assistant, a worm/snake man that's literally named Yes Man.
Ready the transformation chamber.
Yes, monster. Yes. I'll get right on it.
Do it now!
Oh, yes, certainly. Planet Master, sir. Yes. Yes.
There's Hardware, who's this little troll guy that builds all their weapons and handles most of the technical work. Buzzsaw, who's a giant robot covered in saw blades. Pretty self-explanatory. Speaking of which, there's another robot named Pokerface, a slick con man in charge of Monstar's gambling racket. Mumbo Jumbo, who's yet another robot who's the muscle of the bad guys. He is quite literally a mechanical bull. Melodia, who's a punk rocker that may or may not be a descendant of one of the misfits from Gem and the Holograms.
Now, no one in this galaxy will be able to resist us. If anyone stands up to us, we'll just burn them out. And I will be the most powerful woman in the world.
She attacks using her terrible music, which sometimes just sounds like she's banging on the keys. And yes, I'm sure you've guessed her and Bluegrass square off constantly and have epic rock battles with laser shooting guitars in space. Guys, I think we finally reached peak 80s. We're never going to top this. It's all downhill from here. Also, I wonder if this is where Regular Show got some of its ideas from. Arguably, the most dangerous of the bad guys is Molecular, who has the ability to change into anyone or anything. Even functional mechanical devices like weapons and vehicles. He's been able to fool everyone and has snuck into Hawkhaven multiple times. He even disguised himself as the Mirage once and nobody noticed, even when they were inside. Boy, that must have been weird for him. Or maybe he liked it, I don't know. There's Windhammer, who has a giant tuning fork and can create windstorms in space. That makes no sense, but spoilers, we're going to be saying that a lot later in this review. The youngest member is a kid named Time Stopper, who has a device that can stop time. But he can control what he stops, so it's more like he just freezes things in place. However, it only lasts for about a minute, or else he explodes or something. Also, his powers apparently don't work in the dark. Because arbitrary reasons. Finally, there's the worst member of the bad guys, Zero. He has the ability to steal people's memories, which he records on a tape reel that's mounted to his chest. I don't know which is more absurd, the fact that it's mounted to his chest or that this is the distant future and they're still using tape. I know they had no idea how technology would advance when they made this show, but it's still pretty funny to see stuff like this. So that's a lot of villains, but later in the series we get introduced to more Silverhawks to even things out a bit. And this is where things start to get wacky. Yeah, just let that sink in for a minute. The first new Silverhawk we meet is Hotwing. His whole thing is that he's really into magic. And I'm not talking about wizardry or anything like that, I mean regular magic. Though he is equipped with mind lasers, which I guess is appropriate. He also might be the most powerful of the Silverhawks because he's easily bested Monstar a few times. But then there's Flashback. He's a Silverhawk from the future with the ability to time travel. Yes, for some reason they decided to equip this intergalactic law enforcement agent with time travel technology. That seems a bit overkill. So let me get this straight. They have time travel technology and they just gave it to this random guy. Hey man, here's some time travel tech. Just don't mess up the past, okay? I'm sure you'll use that responsibly. Though they also kind of establish how his time travel works. He basically returns to where he was at that point in time with all the memories of where he was so he can alter events. I guess that's a good way to prevent a time paradox. And that's good because I'd like to once again state that I hate time travel. His introduction episode was pretty good though. He meets with a more elderly stargazer who tells him about a time when the Silverhawks were all wiped out trying to save a planet. So he goes back to carry out the mission himself so that they get saved. You know, that's actually pretty cool. It just seems needlessly complicated for this show. Thankfully, the last two we meet are a bit more simple, like Condor, who is an old partner of Stargazer and every bit as gruff. I also like that they gave him a voice that sounds like Humphrey Bogart.
You'll pay for this, Condor!
I'm looking forward to it, monster.
Finally, there's Moonstriker, who is a young upstart with everything to prove. Fortunately, though, he doesn't screw things up too much and even has a little bit of character development.
Not bad work, Moonstriker, for the new kid on the block. He learned his way around Limbo pretty quick for a greenhorn.
He's not a greenhorn anymore. He's one of us.
Give me 5.
One thing I don't like about these guys, though, is that they took up most of the focus in the later episodes, and the rest of the cast wasn't seen as much. I know you want to show off your cool new characters, but you also got to keep the characters people got attached to. Voice-wise, we have some talent brought over from Thundercats. Larry Kenney, Bob McFadden, Peter Newman, who was the voice of Tigra, voices Quicksilver.
Monstar and his mob are still loose, and the universe won't be safe until we get them back behind bars.
Well, I guess he finally got to be leader. Earl Hammond is one I neglected to talk about in my Thundercats review. He was the voice of Mum-Ra, who has one of the best and most iconic villain voices ever. Here he voices Monstar and pretty much brings that same energy.
Moonstar of Limbo, give me the might, the muscle, the menace of Moonstar!
Back then, if you needed a voice for a loud, gravelly bad guy, he was your man.
Come on and fight, Yellow Hawks!
Oh, hey, look, it's Tallyhawk from the show. What's that, Tallyhawk? We gotta go to a commercial break. Oh, come on, you know nobody likes those. You're saying that if I put in more ad breaks, I can earn enough revenue to get that Stronghold figure they made? Sorry, folks, this is important. The animation isn't too great, but I think that's to be expected. It's about on par with Season 1 of Thundercats. Shame, seeing as how the intro looks awesome. In fact, it has some of the best animation I've seen in an intro. I love the one shot of Monstar's metal body ripping through his skin. It looks awesome. And of course, it's not an 80s cartoon without a rocking theme song. So here's where I make some kind of joke about me not being able to play the full song because of YouTube. But there is a guitar riff in this theme that we really need to appreciate. Content ID be damned, roll it! I love when they go extra hard for these theme songs. It's good for the soul. So the galaxy of Limbo is a bit of a strange place and seems pretty small for, you know, a galaxy. There's a planet called Bedlama inhabited by peaceful aliens that we really don't get to know very well. They have an artificial sun, which seems a bit excessive. If your galaxy requires a giant and clearly expensive artificial sun to be able to function, then it's not worth living in. There's a bank planet, a fully automated planet run by an AI that does something. I mentioned the penal planet before, which is where all the criminals are held, obviously. And there's also a casino planet, which again is more like a space station. Does this show know what a planet is? There's even an Old West style saloon where a lot of the villains hang out, and I love that they explicitly state that they don't serve alcohol. A dry galaxy. Very Christian of them. There are also 3 other villains that hang out there and are seen frequently, but I don't think their names are ever even mentioned. But they're kind of treated like jokes anyway, so whatever. They suck. There's also some other weird recurring characters in this series, like Seymour, who drives a space taxi and may or may not be inspired by an obscure DC character called Space Cabbie.
Not enough cabs in Limbo, they say. If you ask me, and nobody does, there's too many cabs in Limbo. You know what I mean? I've been without a fare for 3 hours.
That's right, I'm addressing you, the viewing audience. Yeah, I got no regard for the fourth wall. You want to make something of it? I find it hilarious that everyone seems to use his taxi. Even the good guys sometimes. God, it's like the first Deadpool movie. And this poor guy gets abused. Even from the SilverHawks.
Thanks, Seymour.
Hey, wait a minute. You didn't pay the fare. You know what I mean?
This is official business, Seymour. I'll have to put in a requisition.
You know, some of us are just trying to make an honest living around here. You know what I mean?
You're literally made of silver and you won't pay my fare? I'm trying to support my family! As if things weren't bad enough for this guy, eventually he gets a partner named Zeke, who's some kind of space bird, and also the worst character in the show because he's an annoying, selfish prick. At one point he steals Hot Wings' quote-unquote magic. Yeah, apparently he does use real magic, sort of, and it needs to be replenished with a thing, but Zeke steals it to cause a bunch of trouble, and surprisingly the SilverHawks don't want to kill him.
I'm sorry, Commander Stargazer.
You're on probation. You've got to report to us every day.
Yes, Commander.
You are confined to Seymour's cab until further notice.
Yeah. Gee, please, Commander, anything but that.
Listen, you little bastard, you're lucky we don't stuff you for Thanksgiving. Now get out! There's some other recurring characters, like the guy that runs the bank planet, Lord Cash, or the guy that runs the artificial sun, Professor Power, who has a light bulb for a head. Or how about the guy that runs the penal planet, Warden Lockup? Come on, that's not even clever. You know, for a show like this, there sure is a surprising lack of creativity. I mean, for one, a lot of the characters' names are basically what they are or what they do. And some are just really simplistic, like Monstar, Monster. Get it? It's not even like he's some kind of tyrant or cosmic horror. He's the leader of a criminal mob, and the SilverHawks have to try and stop him. The show is pretty much an overglorified game of cops and robbers. Though sometimes he tries something a bit big, like kidnapping an ambassador and nearly causing a war. But I think my favorite is when he got fed up with the SilverHawks, so he had a battle cruiser constructed and sets his sight on Earth. Not to take over the planet, but to take over the organized crime rings in Chicago.
We will fly to Earth and take over the Earth mob in Chicago. Those Chicago boys are pretty tough.
Yes. We'll need some awesome firepower to muscle in on their operation.
Unfortunately, he gets stopped by the SilverHawks, so we never get to see that plan go through. But can you imagine being some thug in Chicago, thinking you're tough and you've seen it all, and then one day walking out of a bar or a warehouse or wherever you hide out, and then seeing a giant spaceship with its guns pointing at you? Yeah, we'll see how tough you are then. Also, Monstar kinda sucks. He looks intimidating, and his transformation, while unexplained, is pretty cool. He usually just shows up and promptly gets beaten. He's no Mum-Ra, that's for sure. Also, his crew is constantly betraying him or trying to trick him. In one episode, Pokerface creates a slot machine that somehow blows up a random planet when you win. That's horrifying, but it costs a lot to play, and it's basically a scam to get Monstar's money.
I love this game. I want to play it again.
Of course, Planet Master. And it only costs $1 billion for each try. A bargain in destruction.
Pokerface would later go on to work for 2K Games. There were a couple of decent episodes, though. The first one I remember watching was one where Monstar creates a robot clone of Quicksilver to cause havoc. But Quicksilver defeats him because he's part human, and that's what makes him strong. It's a pretty good episode to start with, but the truth is, it's one of the few decent episodes. In fact, they even recycle ideas, because not long after this episode, Steelheart finds out that they made more copies of the SilverHawks, but they're not as good as the last one.
Everyone in position.
Yes, Planet Master.
I guess their budget ran out. The strangest and possibly funniest episode is one where some weird phenomenon happens that makes some of the good guys bad and some of the bad guys good.
The storm is composed of matter and antimatter, Commander.
It has a reversing effect, sir. Turns good people bad and bad people good.
Yeah, obviously. That makes total sense. So then the SilverHawks start bullying people and Monstar's crew actually tries to stop them. I always find situations like this where the roles get reversed to be pretty funny.
Well, what happened? I'm sorry I yelled at you.
Don't mention it, Monstar, my friend.
Eventually it wears off, but the SilverHawks get arrested and the warden refuses to let them go because he's an asshole. So with the threat of Monstar looming over the galaxy of Limbo, they break out of jail. They're the good guys, right? And that's another thing. The SilverHawks sometimes do stuff that's a bit questionable. Like when they wanted to raid Poker Face's casino, but it's out of their jurisdiction. So they towed it to a place where they had authority. Can they do that? Yeah, so there are a lot more bizarre, poorly written, and just plain baffling episodes than I expected when I rewatched this show. But there is one thing this show does surprisingly well, and believe it or not, it's the PSA segment. Yup, just like most other 80s cartoons, SilverHawks had PSAs to justify selling toys to kids. Usually PSAs would be about life lessons or safety tips, but SilverHawks decided to go an educational route. And unlike most PSAs, which usually had their own separate segment, the one in this show actually had a narrative behind it. In the first episode, Copper Kid shows interest in learning to be a pilot, so Bluegrass decides to train him. But to be a good pilot, he first has to learn about space. So at the end of each episode, he takes a quiz about the planets and the solar system. And it even makes sense that he'd be learning about our solar system since he's not from here.
Now this is the smallest planet in our solar system, and most of the time it's the furthest planet from the sun. For 3 points, kid, what is this planet?
Ah yes, back when Pluto was considered a planet. Still is, damn it. And as the series went on, the questions got a bit harder, and Copper Kid even gets 1 or 2 wrong every once in a while. And I like that despite getting some wrong, he still gets encouragement.
Oh, cheer up, kid. You'll do better tomorrow. Remember, nobody's perfect.
But the best part about this is that it actually has a payoff. In one episode, Bluegrass gets in trouble and needs to be rescued, but the SilverHawks can't get to him because he's the only one that can fly the Mirage. Seems like a bit of an oversight if you ask me, but then they remember Copper Kid has been learning to fly, so they have him pilot the Mirage and they can go save him. This might be one of the most well-handled and well-thought-out PSA segments I've seen in any show, because not only was it integrated with the actual show, it was also informative and educational. The problem is, for a show that tried to educate people about space, it sure doesn't seem to know how space works. So the galaxy of Limbo seems to have some problems, like how nobody seems to need any oxygen or protection from the harsh environment of space. The SilverHawks deploy some kind of face guard when they launch, and I thought that's how they were breathing, but they were also seen without them, and I thought maybe they didn't need to breathe because they're cyborgs, and maybe some of the aliens can survive in space, but then you see more human characters just hanging out in space with no problem. So I guess oxygen is just abundant here. On top of that, there seems to be some kind of downward gravitational pull because every time someone gets tossed, they fall. Where are they falling to? This is space! And I wouldn't make such a big deal about this, but it keeps happening. This is also when I started to realize the SilverHawks don't fly. When Condor and Moonstriker show up, they're established to be the first SilverHawks with their own flight ability, so the others just kind of glide. How much did this SilverHawks project cost? Probably billions. And all I have to show for it is a built-in wingsuit. I think my favorite moment was when these two alien guys had to abandon ship and they used parachutes. No, that's not how this works at all. You know, there were some rumors that the SilverHawks were going to get a crossover with Thundercats. It obviously never happened, but I can definitely see it happening because clearly they exist in the same universe. You know, it's a shame because there are some interesting ideas here. Like the show's tagline, partly metal, partly real, was a cool idea. Like it's their human willpower and courage that truly makes them strong and not their cybernetic bodies. But it was never really explored outside the episode with the Quicksilver clone. In several episodes, Stargazer was seen to be falling apart because he's so old, but he's a gruff old man that doesn't like people fussing over him, even when it's a matter of life or death. I was most disappointed with Time Stopper, who didn't get much development. They established that he's 14 and mixed up with a bunch of criminals, but sometimes they don't treat him right, so he ends up foiling their plans on his own. There was even an episode where the SilverHawks asked him to stop a flood with his powers, and he even pushes himself to his limit to do so. They could have given him a moment where he sees the light and have him renounce his criminal ways, but it never happens. What a missed opportunity. And even the whole concept of this show is kind of dark. I mean, it's about people that basically give up their human bodies to fight crime in space. They even establish that it vastly extends their lifespans.
That must be it. Hawk Haven, home for the next few centuries.
That's not something you just decide to do. Also, what's up with Tallyhawk? He's a cyborg bird that they sent into space. How did he become a cyborg? Was he in an accident? Why was he sent to space? And he even has a remote control, which raises all kinds of ethical questions. This show gets more and more messed up the more you think about it. But you know what the worst part of this show is? It's basically Thundercats. Yeah, I mean an animal-themed team taking on a bunch of weirdos and monsters led by a big evil transforming guy. It's Thundercats. I mean, Monstar is basically a lesser version of Mum-Ra.
Moonstar of Limbo, transform this decayed form to Moonstar, the ever-living!
In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these characters were unused designs from Thundercats. But while Thundercats had some semblance of lore and focus, SilverHawks was just all over the place. The characters weren't even as good. Lion-O had some development and personality. Quicksilver has almost no personality. He's just generic good guy. It's boring. Though the final episode was kind of interesting. The SilverHawks want to put on an air show, but Monstar's crew ruins it. However, I think the team behind the show knew that it was going to be their final episode.
We've been up here in Limbo a long time, Lieutenant. I just wanted to tell you I couldn't have asked for a better second in command.
Can't go wrong with an all-out character battle as your big finale, but they also seem self-aware with how the show turned out overall.
Well, we didn't exactly excel today, did we? I guess no matter how well you plan things, there's always an unknown factor. But didn't we put on some kind of air show?
And that's kind of interesting because the truth is, SilverHawks didn't really do that well. Though it's hard to say exactly why. Maybe it got lost in the mix of all the other cartoons of the 80s. Maybe it was because the toy's action feature made the figures kind of fragile and they would break frequently. Or maybe it just couldn't live up to the popularity of Thundercats. But I feel like SilverHawks can easily be put into that ever-growing category of shows that would greatly benefit from a reboot. In fact, I'm surprised there hasn't really been any attempt to try and bring it back. The closest thing we got was a brief cameo from Monstar in the 2011 Thundercats cartoon, alongside a reference to tiger sharks. Rankin Bass's other animal-based superhero show.
The planet is 73% water, so we'll need every tiger shark we've got.
Hey, I'm just amazed someone remembered tiger sharks enough to make a reference to it. Now, some people have pointed to Thundercats' lack of success in a comeback as to the reason why SilverHawks never had one. Though, let's be honest, if Thundercats is any indication, had they brought back SilverHawks, one of two things was going to happen. Either it was going to be really good and canceled prematurely, or really stupid and probably go on for 100+ episodes. Perhaps we should cut our losses. Personally, though, I would have settled for an IDW comic or a line of classics action figures. The original show is not very good. In fact, it's a bit worse than I expected. I feel like they just threw together a whole bunch of ideas they thought were cool, but without any focus or cohesion. But some might find it ridiculous enough to enjoy, and on top of that, the characters were fun and memorable, and they managed to pull off one of the better PSA segments the 80s had to offer. I think that alone deserves a trophy. And the overall concept, admittedly, was kind of awesome. Though it's not likely to ever happen, I do hope one day we get to see these Hawks soar once again. Well, that takes care of SilverHawks and yet another Patreon request. Thank you very much for your generous donations, but I think I'm going to put a hold on Patreon requests for a while, as much as I've greatly been appreciating the generosity and the enthusiasm towards the show. There are a lot of things that I've been meaning to get to. In fact, it's been a while, so next time, why don't I review something obscure?
I'm going to put this one right between her pretty...
That's the line of the show right here.